So in part 2 of this chapter, we'll take our block torso and turn it into something that looks like a tightly knit jacket that our ninja wears, as per the concept art. I'll start off by adding a subsurf modifier to our block torso. I'll take the view subsurf level up to 2 and turn on optimal display so we don't have too many wire lines there that will get in the way. And I'll also come and uncheck wire so that I can see the whole shape a little bit easier. If I come back to the subsurf modifier view options, I can uncheck this little box here, and that will allow subsurf to not show while in edit mode. And what I can do then is have a much better view of the blocked mesh cage, and then I can always check how it looks in subsurf by just going out of edit mode. The topology I worked on seemed to come out quite well. I'm just making some small tweaks so that the muscles stand out properly. And what it seems to give the indication of is a material that sort of shows the muscular structure, but not too much. It's a little bit stylized and almost as if the suit is giving that look, a bit like the Batman suit. So now I'm just extruding inward and then once more down with the neckline, making sure to join any vertices at the mirror point that get split away. I used smooth a couple of times, and that can always break 2 vertices that are merged at the center. And then I can just add some loop cuts in to bevel it. So I usually add a loop cut fairly close on either side, and that will give a nice sharp edge without it being too sharp, by keeping a little bit of distance. Now I'm just going to tweak the back part of this collar so that there's no gaps behind the mask. And that looks quite good for us to start taking this mesh and turning it into a jacket. In the concept art, we can see that we're going to have this flap of material that comes over the chest and will be buttoned up later. So I'm going to have to come in and apply my mirror modifier. Now at first it will say that I can't apply it in edit mode, so I've got to watch out for that. And there I can apply it. And again I'll turn on subsurf in edit mode. And what I'm going to do is select these vertices from the middle of the collarbone down to the bottom of the rib cage at the sternum there. And by hitting Ctrl E and selecting mark seam, it will mark these vertices with an orange line even when they're not selected. So from there I'll come out of edit mode, add a circle, and I'm just going to rotate it on the x-axis while still staying in front view so that it's facing me. Again, delete all the vertices on one side. I'll then Ctrl J, join it to the torso mesh at about so we've got the semicircle that basically matches the flap that comes over in my concept art. I also just marked one more edge as a seam down below the sternum there, just because I think my flap will come down a little bit lower. And now in side view I'm just actually I've rotated the flap a little bit, but from there, once it's been rotated even a tiny bit, I can just scale it along the y-axis, and that causes it to skew rather than actually rotate, which will make the height in my front view different. And then I just place the vertices in side view fairly close to my actual torso, the chest area. I've then selected the semicircle with L, hidden it with H, and then I'm going to Alt, right middle mouse select the entire front of the chest down the middle, and then I'm going to rip the edge with V. Now I have to make sure that the mouse cursor is on the left side of all the vertices when I do this, and then I can just Alt right click again, select either of the loops, and just make them overlap, as you can see. I've then just made another loop cut on the left side here and matched it up just behind the other overlapping part of the mesh. I'm now going to select all the vertices in this edge loop and deselect all the ones that aren't marked with a seam. Press P to separate and choose selection, and then I'm going to Alt H to reveal the semicircle, and that's going to have all the vertices selected. So I can again just press P and split that into its own object, and then I'll join those two that I just made into one. So what I have now is just this semicircle and a straight line of vertices, no faces yet. Now I'm going to merge these two vertices at the bottom, at the corner, and also the top. And I'll just tweak the vertices a bit so that I can get the outline of the cloth flap to look nice. I'll just really make sure that those semicircle vertices are sticking to the torso so there isn't too much of a gap. And then I'm just going to add some faces very generally, horizontally, as you can see. I just merged two vertices into one on the left side there, just to make sure that there's enough vertices on either side. Then I'll add a little bit more detail. I'll add a loop cut vertically and begin pushing the vertices out with Alt S and just by translating with G. And I can make another loop cut a little bit closer to the middle of the chest. And especially around the pec area, I'm just going to make sure that there's no intersections. And I've changed the material to be a little bit lighter, just so that I can notice if there's any part of the torso popping through. Made another loop cut here close to the middle on the left side, and again just Alt S out a little bit. I'm going to select some of these loops behind and just press H to hide them, and then I'm going to join the flap to the torso. Now it's turned the whole mesh white, so I'm just going to add a new material and take down the color of that to how it was before. Those vertices that are missing there were hidden before, they weren't deleted. And now I'm just going to join some of these vertices together. I can also just select both the loops, and in the W specials menu I can choose remove doubles. And then I'm just going through and moving vertices to see if there's any gaps and merging vertices together. Again, I've just added a loop cut to the flap just to match things like the extra loop there for definition of the pec and whatnot. I'll just select these two vertices and Control E and then edge slide them up a little bit higher and merge that to the very bottom of the flap at the middle. And with the flap now connected to my torso, I'm just going to aim to get the mesh as smooth as possible. And this always takes a little bit of time, just after adding all these edge loops in and playing with the mesh so much, you have to go through and just smooth everything out and make sure there aren't any big bumps or dips. I'm also smoothing out the point where the cloth comes over the pec on his left side, as if it's being stretched down a little bit so it won't stick directly to the same pec definition as you can see on the right side. And that's a fairly good checkpoint. You can see some things that remain are the buttons and the trim on the side. I might attempt the trim that will be forming around the side of the flap, but the buttons I can do later on when we add details. Now I've just Alt H unhidden the vertices that were hidden before, and then I've gone in and hidden some at the front. Now this feature, Alt B, will make a box selection that you can do, and it's a wonderful feature where it will block out anything outside the box that you make in the 3D view. Now since I made a loop cut while these vertices were hidden, I need to just cut another edge through the middle. So I can do that by K and then holding left click and dragging across. And what you're left with is two tries here and there that I can select all four of the vertices or both of those faces and just hit F to turn it into a quad. That looks pretty good. I can just select all the vertices going directly up the jacket, and I'm just going to move them across a little bit. Really just minor tweaking at this point. Smoothing out and seeing if I'm happy with the point where the middle of the jacket is. Just various little proportion things. And I'm happy with my proportions, so I can just get rid of the background image. And by selecting all the vertices around the flap and down the middle of the jacket, I'm just extruding them back on the y-axis into the body. Just by grabbing them 2 vertices at a time, I can push and pull the vertices out and in just to adjust the thickness of the cloth against the torso and keep that even. The bottom of the flap area there is a little bit smooth in subsurf mode, so if I add a loop cut here and just edge slide these vertices at the edge very close to the bottom of the flap, and with a mix of smoothing the vertices multiple times and scaling with Alt S, I can get the area smoothed out quite well. And with that looking pretty good, I might begin work on the trim that goes around the outside of the flap. I'm just going to select all the vertices around the flap area and duplicate them, and then separate to a new object. I'll extrude, right click to cancel the automatic grab, and scale downward. I'm going to get rid of the background image in my side view now that I'm working in that view, and I'm just going to select some loops and delete the edge loop with X. And then I'll begin extruding the bottom of the trim just along the torso some more to match the concept art. I'll smooth the vertices and Control N to make sure all the normals are flipped the right way. And with that initial 2D shape looking good, I'm going to extrude on the Y-axis back into the body. And I'm going to make sure that the extrusion goes past the flap from the original torso mesh, so there aren't any intersections like you can see down here at the bottom. This area of the flap is poking outside of the trim, so I'm just going to edit the trim with scaling along an axis, and Alt right clicking some of the cylindrical loops and moving them. I'm just grabbing the 2 inside edge loops of the trim, and I can also scale across the normal with Alt S to change its size. And only selecting the inside face loop there will give me a chance to allow the trim to look a bit flatter and thicker on the side, as you can see there. I'll just pay attention to some final tweaks, looking at the thickness of the trim throughout the whole flap, just to keep that as consistent as possible. And then I'll begin extruding just off to the left. The mesh looks quite cylindrical in edit mode because I've turned on subsurf in edit mode, so the vertices are really just an extrusion of squares, but they'll look quite round in that view. And here I'm just selecting a loop on the inside of the coat and just edge sliding it along, and that will make the corner a little less sharp by moving it away from the other edge loops. That looks quite good, though I notice there's a little glitch down here at the back. It seems somehow I had a new face made, so I'm just merging those vertices together and making the final 2 tries into a quad. in those places to fix that problem. I think that may have happened when I made the knife cut, for example. So just keep an eye out for those type of things. And I just deleted one edge loop here that I made to sharpen the bottom of the flap, but it seems to not have much of an effect now that the trim's there, so I've successfully gotten rid of that one. And I've got a simpler mesh with the same look, and that's always a nice thing to aim for. I will always have a look and see if there's any vertices that might be just clogging up the mesh that are not needed. And finally, if you remember those 2 tries I made earlier, I'm just going to turn that into a quad. We'll be adding in the buttons and accessories later, but for now that's the torso done, and we can move on to the arms.